Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk today. The topic is moving violations. And as ever, the talks are always based on my personal essay of the week, which you can find at comeasyouare, alliehamilton.yogisanonymous.com. And when I do these podcasts after I write the essay, a lot of what I talk about is based on the comments underneath the essay. So it's really like a conversation that is happening in this community about these topics. And this week, I was writing about, so many things that we're seeing in the news that are just so deeply disturbing. And my concern lately, my main concern, there are a lot of things to be concerned about right now, but my main concern lately is just what is happening to girls and women across not just our country, but in the world at large. And, there is so much male violence that is in the news that I didn't put a trigger warning on the essay this week because we're all these are just things happening in the world every day, and there have also been studies about how trigger warnings don't really work because the minute you see the words trigger warning, you're triggered. But that's the world that we're living in, and I was really attempting to get across, I think for my whole life, I have been telling myself that the things that I went through as a kid growing up in New York City, I really thought that was why, that it was a product of, I had multiple things happen as I was growing up. I grew up in I was born in 1971. I grew up on the Upper West Side, and my parents split when I was 4, and from the time I was 8, I'm Gen X. From the time I was 8, I was like packing my own lunches and taking public transportation and moving around the city, and that was not uncommon. It was a lot of the kids in my class. I went to a tiny little private school on the Upper West Side for elementary school, and then I went to a small private school on the east side, and then I went to Columbia University. I was, it wasn't an uncommon, where I was moving and walking and being. It's just a lot of people. And at the time, in the 70s, in New York City, there were about 7 million people. And so when you compress 7 million people into basically 22 square miles of space, you can imagine the odds of things happening are going to go up. And so that's always for me kind of how I have understood the number of things that I experienced as a child, as a girl going through puberty, as a teenager, as a young woman in New York City. I thought, okay, that's why I had so many of these things happen, and because I was on my own so much. And now, as I have grown up and seen it's not, I'm realizing it's everywhere. It's not just New York City. And sometimes you can be, you can have very colloquial ideas about things anyway, right? You just, it's easy to think that how things are for you in your environment or how things are for everyone. I kind of had that flipped. I really thought that, it was mostly because I grew up in this big city and was on my own a lot. I just don't feel that way anymore. And I know that is not the case because I am in conversation with so many women not just from around the country, but from around the world, who are like, yep, putting their hands up, me too, me too, me too. So it's all of us. And that is deeply, deeply troubling, and it's getting worse. And so, as someone growing up in this system, it's a patriarchy certainly here, but in many, many places in the world, and more all the time, I'm beside myself right now. And I have a daughter in this world. I have a son in this world. Like, I don't want this for, my children, your children, any of us, with children or without children. I don't want this for us. This is not how it should be. And this is not acceptable. But I think that this kind of conversation has not been in the mainstream enough. And I think that a lot of what has happened with girls and women growing up in a culture where if you come forward and say, something happened to me, I was attacked, I was assaulted, the first thing that happens, and we all know it, I don't even have to say it, the first questions that get asked, right? What was she wearing? Like, how much had she had to drink? What's her sexual history? I mean, instantly the attention is put on the person who was attacked and not the attacker. And I mean, we've just seen this again and again and again. So when you're growing up in that kind of environment, whether, for me, I watched what happened with the Jennifer Levin case. And, that was like in my, in the waters that I was swimming in, because I was in that city, and they were a little bit older, but they were like going to the same bars, like people we knew these places, and we obviously Central Park and the things that happened. I mean, she was just, it was, what happened in that case is so typical of what happens in all of these cases. And so it really does, infect the waters that you're swimming in, whether you are a girl, whatever. It's like all of us are swimming in these waters. And obviously some of this is on my mind because of what is happening politically. And I have talked about the abortion bans and how, I'm watching what's happening to girls and women in states with restrictive abortion bans, and trying to have that conversation even has been wild, because, and I'll just say this again in case anyone is kind of new to the conversation, one of the most upsetting things about what is happening when Roe was overturned, and again, the former president is really happy to take responsibility for that, for appointing the 3 ultra-conservative Supreme Court justices. He wanted them to overturn Roe, and they did what he asked. They did what he wanted, and he's proud of it. He keeps saying everybody wanted this, and, all the scholars wanted this, and all the, the legal scholars and all the people, and no, they didn't. 62% of Americans across all party lines wanted to keep Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. But he overturned that. He got them to overturn that. And once that happened, it triggered all the states to write their own laws. No one got to vote on that. And the reason that I'm saying these things to you is based on the feedback I've gotten from people, and some of them have been angry. And like, for example, a woman wrote to me in all caps and said, the women in these states got to vote on this. This is what they want. And you people in New York and California should keep your, opinions to yourselves. They didn't get to vote on it. That's not how it works. Once Roe v. Wade was overturned, it triggered all the states that needed to write their own laws, and they did. The legislators in those states wrote those laws. And the only way that you get to quote unquote vote on what has been decided for you is either you get it on the ballot, which not every state allows, and even sometimes with the states that do allow that, you have to get a certain number of signatures. This just happened in Missouri. And, and then if you get enough signatures, and like, for example, in Missouri, I think they needed like 188,000 signatures, and they got like 388,000. And then they still tried to block it. They still tried to say, no, you still can't get it on the ballot. But they did get it on the ballot. It is on the ballot because the ACLU got involved, and this is the degree that people are having to fight to even get to say how they feel about these things. What is happening is that because the procedure, and I really do want to move through this because that's not what the essay was about this week, but it's certainly part of the waters we're swimming in right now. And part of what I feel like you need to understand in order to be in this conversation is that a D and C or a D and E are the procedures that you would get if you were electing to have an abortion, or if you were pregnant and desperately wanting to be pregnant and happy to be pregnant, but had a pregnancy-related emergency like a miscarriage and went running to the ER because you're bleeding out. The way these laws are written in the states with the restrictive abortion bans, doctors are afraid to give women who are bleeding out the D and C or D and E that they need. It's the same procedure to stop the hemorrhaging from a miscarriage as it would be if you were electing to have an abortion. And a lot of people did not know that. And I know that because they responded to me, like, I did not know that was the same procedure, and that these bans are affecting people who are having emergency situations. And so there's only two ways. Once your state changes the laws, there's only two ways to fight that. And one of them, again, is if you can get it on the ballot, and not every state allows you to do that. And even in the ones that do, it's the same legislators that wrote the laws that are going to make it hard for you to get it on the ballot so you can vote on it. And then B, you can sue your state. So for example, Kate Cox, she sued her state because she was in that exact situation. She had 2 kids. She and her husband desperately wanted a third baby. She was pregnant, and there was a real problem, a fatal fetal abnormality that was putting her life at risk. The baby was not viable, and her future fertility was at risk. And so she had to sue her state. And then the court said, okay, yes, you meet the requirements to have an abortion, to save your life, to save your fertility. And Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, said no, he blocked it. And that's what we're talking about here. She ended up having to leave her state to get the life-saving health care she needed. And so we have a lot of girls and women in these states who want to be pregnant, who are now not. They go to the hospital because they're having an emergency, and they're being told, you know what, the way these laws are written, as a doctor here, I can't actually intervene until your life is at risk so much that nobody could argue with that. No one could later say to me, her life wasn't at risk yet, because these doctors can go to jail. They can lose their medical licenses. So that's what's going on. And that is an environment that is currently happening in this country. In almost half the states, we have some form of restrictive abortion bans going on. Let alone, a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old who is raped or, and being forced to carry this baby to term. It's like you've already had your power taken away. You've already been violated once and had no control over what was going to happen to your body. And now the government is going to tell you, you still don't, you still can't, you still don't get to decide what's going to happen next. This is not okay. Boys and men in our country are not going through this. It's just girls and women. And that really, that should not be okay with anyone. But that's part of the waters that we're all swimming in here. And that's something I've been talking about for, weeks. And then there are the things that I was writing about in the essay this week that are deeply personal, and they're not easy to write about. I get no joy from sharing a lot of these stories. It's not fun for me to think about. I mentioned, I have a photographic memory, so when I'm writing about things, I can see them. And sometimes that's really, that's advantageous when you're writing, and sometimes it's not. There's a lot of things I don't really want to revisit. I'm fine. I'm a grown woman. I'm 53. I've done a lot of work. I'm okay. I'm out in the world and I'm well, but it's still not pleasant to go back and write about these things or talk about them. But it was constant. And it is still ongoing. This is not like something that has resolved. And so just, for example, I had so many experiences from the time I was 8 all the way through my life where, men exposed themselves. It happened the first time that I remember it happening. I was 8 years old. I was in the 3rd grade in Central Park on a field trip with my art class, sketching a tree with my best friend. And we were sketching and looking up and sketching and looking up. And at a certain point, we looked down and looked up, and there was a man there with his pants down, playing with himself, laughing and looking at me. He was clearly not well, but it's like that was, we didn't know what to do with that. We jumped up and went running for the teacher. And we all left the park. Field trip was over, but no one talked to us after about what had happened. Not at school, not at home. It was like this thing that just, happened, and there was no explanation. There was no conversation. I think we've come a long way as far as understanding like childhood development and trauma and the need for conversation and all of that. But at the time, we're just kind of left with that hanging there. And I, was with my same best friend in the elevator of the building where I grew up when I was 12. And another man, pulled his pants down when we were between floors. And this is the kind of thing that's just, it should not be happening. It's a violation. You don't know what to do with it. You're a kid. When I was 10 on a public bus, I was just riding the bus as you do. And I made eye contact with the man sitting across the way from me. And he looked down in his lap and kind of looked up at me like he was sharing some secret. So I looked down and, he's exposing himself. It just goes on and on and on. And a man grabbed me in the stairwell when I was 13 on my way to ballet, and I got away. But it was terrifying. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, I could keep going, but I don't want to. I just want you to understand this was like a constant thing that was happening. You're walking on the street and a car passes you when you get to the intersection, and there's a guy looking at you, and he's got, he's exposing himself. It's that's not normal, and that's not okay. And obviously being physically assaulted is not ever okay, but just even visually assaulted and being given this message that these are just things that happen and no one can save you from that. There's nothing that's going to get done. Nothing's going to be said. When that happened, this man grabbed me from behind when I was 13 and put his hand over my mouth and, said to me, just don't move, okay? And it was because he asked. I froze at first. I was having, as you do, fight, flight, freeze. In that first moment, I froze. My heart was, I didn't know what to do. But because he then said, just don't move, okay, and I realized his question is what made me realize no, no is an answer I can give right now. And I bit his hand, I screamed, I elbowed him in the ribs, I turned around so I was facing him on the stairwell, and crab walked away. I didn't want to turn my back on him again. And so we were staring at each other. And it was so there's that stuff. But then there's the other stuff. And I was writing about this too, I had friends of my parents, male friends of my parents, who were hitting on me, showing up at our apartment at times where they knew I'd be there alone. Just not okay. Predatory behavior that, constant and unacceptable. Now, I went back and was talking about how I think most of us form our first sort of opinions about men and women from our parents or our primary caregivers, whomever they may be, right? So your first understanding of what a man is either going to be your dad or whomever the male, primary male person was in your life in early childhood. That's your understanding. And so depending on the luck of the draw, like if you got a great dad, then when you go out into the world and maybe you meet men who might be volatile or violent or intimidating in some way, that's like, then you're getting this other education and trying to make sense of it. And if you had a violent dad and you go out into the world and you meet like a kind, loving man, then you might be like, that might be a revelation to you, but this is how we're learning as we're growing. We're kind of like taking things in from our environment. We're drawing conclusions. We're understanding things about how people are, how the world is, what our role is, like who we're supposed to, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable in our family of origin, but also like in the culture. We're like little sponges. So we're just absorbing all this information. And then as we grow, we, get out in the world and hopefully figure out some of the things maybe we learned in our families of origin are things that don't resonate with us once we're out in the world and seeing how things work and drawing our own conclusions. But that's the work, hopefully, is you're growing and you're, absorbing information. And for me, with my dad, and I wrote about this, and I've written about it a lot, my dad was someone who was married 4 times in his life. I don't even know what to say. Like, he was just a womanizer, like, of proportions I have not seen since. And so he got married, he had 2 kids, and he was apparently like cheating on his wife before he met my mother. Then he met my mother, who was 3 years older than his daughter, had an affair with her, left his family, married my mother, had me, started cheating on my mother when she was pregnant with me. They split when I was 4. And then he moved in with the woman who became my stepmom and started cheating on her. And unfortunately, what happened is when my parents split and I was 4 and I started going back and forth, my dad gave me a front row seat to this stuff. So he would, for example, pick me up from, school or from my mom's, and we'd be going to see a lady friend of his. And what that meant is we'd go to someone's apartment, and this someone would always be like in her 20s and, thin with big boobs and long hair. That's what my dad liked. He would tell me that. And I'd get parked in front of her TV, and they'd go into her bedroom to rehearse. My dad was an actor. And then we would go home to my stepmom, who would have dinner on the table and would ask, like, what did you do? Where did you go? And my dad would say we had gone to the playground or we'd gone to the Museum of Natural History, things that I really would have loved to have been doing instead of sitting in some woman's apartment. And I would be quiet because my dad would tell me, we're not going to say anything to your stepmom when we get home because it's going to hurt her feelings and she's not going to understand. And I didn't do anything wrong, just rehearsing. This is just a friend, but she's really jealous. She's really possessive and she'll get very upset. And I believed him because when women would call our house, my stepmom would end up in the bathroom all night with the door locked sobbing, and I could hear her. So I thought, like, okay, and he would tell me all these women, my mother, so jealous, so possessive, and he just needed to be free and he couldn't commit. And I, as a little kid, thought my dad hung the moon and thought these women were so, possessive and jealous, and why couldn't they just share? And my poor dad was the victim. And I thought that way because I was indoctrinated by my dad to think that way until I was 13. And then, at that time, and that's for a lot of us, you hit puberty, your, autonomy is like in full effect. And you're starting to make sense of the world in a different way. You're paying attention to your friends' parents. You're seeing what's happening, in the stories that you're reading, the books that you're reading, the films that you're seeing, what's happening in your friends' parents' houses. You're just starting to like assimilate more, and understand more and question more, all those things at the same time. And then you kind of start looking at your own family of origin, and anything that feels like, this doesn't seem to be the norm, or this doesn't seem, you might hopefully start to question some of these things. And that's what happened with me. But nonetheless, like, the damage was done as far as spending my formative, childhood years watching this go on. I then thought, well, like, is this all men, or is this just my dad? Like, who is this? What's happening? What is typical? What is quote unquote normal? And then I'm having all these other experiences out in the world with men who are exposing themselves, grabbing me, talking to me inappropriately, showing up at the house, like, and it's really, and then there's also like the societal sort of messaging that you're getting about your value in society as a girl or a woman. Like, what gives you value? What gives you power? And a lot of the emphasis is on how you look, right? Because it's a patriarchy. So the messages that you are getting about what your worth is and what your value is, they're coming from men. And that means men are at the top of the food chain in the media, in all the corporations. Like, all of this messaging is that's what's coming at you. And it's the impact of that is really hard to get across to someone who hasn't lived it. When I talk about these things with women, they're like, yep, yes, I know exactly what you mean. And when you talk about it with men, you can only know what you know and what you've experienced. So it's no one's fault, It's like, I can only know what I know. And then there's like what a girl or woman of color growing up in this culture is going through. I can't know that, but I can certainly try really hard to close my mouth and be interested and listen, so I can understand and like help in any way that I possibly can. And that is what you would hope would be happening across the board, is that anyone who has any amount of power more would be like trying to help, trying to listen, trying to understand. But that is by and large not what happens. And I had examples. So we had a news cycle last week, and I don't want to talk about this too much because I don't want to cry every time I do a podcast here. And but we have an Olympic athlete, a runner, who is set on fire. She is murdered by her ex-boyfriend in front of her two tiny daughters who are 9 and 11, trying to save her. I don't know what to say about that, and so you're listening to this. There's an argument over land that she bought where she built her house so she could live near the grounds where she was training. This is a woman who was a mother, she was a daughter, she is a sister, an Olympic athlete, and was just at the Paris Olympics. She's in Uganda, where there is a tremendous, tremendous problem with violence against women. And she's gone now, and her children are scarred. Like, how are they ever going to be okay? So I'm reading this, and I'm just beside myself. And you think, that's got to be the worst story I'm going to hear for a long time. And you're wrong, because then we have, the case in France with this man who is drugging his wife for a decade and raping her and filming himself, and inviting 72 other men in the area to come and also rape her while he films it for a decade. And out of these 72 men, apparently in 10 years, only 2 or 3 of them showed up at the house, saw that this woman is unconscious and said, I can't do it, and left. And not one of those men then called the police. I don't know what to do with those numbers. I don't know what to do. And this is not New York City. This is a small little village in France with 6,000 people. So it's devastating. And Afghanistan, you're like, now women are not allowed to leave the house unless it's urgent. They are not allowed to raise their voices in public or at home. They're not allowed to sing. If you think that this is not a rampant issue, you're just not paying attention. And the people who aren't paying attention tend to be the people it's not directly impacting. And, even last week, so in this news cycle with these two horrific stories, and I'm not using these names right now. I'm certainly not going to be using the names of the attackers, but I also am not using the names because I feel like people should be remembered for more than what happened to them at the very end, especially when it had nothing to do with them. Anyway, in that same news cycle, in the midst of like all these abortion bans and all these people trying to fight back and get these laws changed and get them on the ballot or sue their states, in the midst of all that, in the midst of these two news stories, right, I have two interactions with men, I know, and like one of them used to take my yoga class all the time years ago, but he was there all the time. I thought he was a nice guy, and we're friends on Facebook, and I had posted the news cycle before that, that the man who is running for president of again, okay, he retweeted a post about it's a picture of Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and underneath it, some cretin male person wrote, funny how I don't know who's listening here, so I don't want to basically he described a sexual act and said it's funny how that sexual act has impacted their careers. And I basically wrote on my page, this is unacceptable for someone who's running for the highest office in the land. If you have this little respect for women, then you really, that disqualifies you. You can, that's more than half the population of the country. If you have that little respect for more than half the population of the country, you should be disqualified, and some man that used to take my yoga class all the time got on my page and said, as if he was going to make me a list, he wrote, number one, it's a joke. Is it edgy and blue? Yes, but it's a joke nonetheless. Okay, that was the length of his list. It had one number on it. And it's the second time he's come on my page and sort of said some, left this type of comment. And the first time he did it, I commented back and he deleted. And so the second time he did it, I took screenshots because I knew he was going to do it again, and I was right. But I wrote back to him and I said, if you find this funny, you are the problem. It's, two, don't come onto my page and mansplain to me about what a joke is. I'm a woman growing up in this culture. Between the two of us, which one of us do you think has a better sense of how this kind of messaging that we hear every day of our lives, how it impacts girls and women growing up in this culture? Do you think I understand this more, or do you think you understand it more? And do you think you're in a position to tell me it's just a joke? It's just exhausting to be dealing with that kind of nonsense in the middle of an environment where girls and women are fighting for their lives right now and not winning a lot of the time. It's unacceptable. I don't have time for that. Just stay off my page with that nonsense. We're not doing that, sir. Wake up and pay attention to what's happening to the women and girls in this world. let alone other, marginalized groups of people, giant groups of people, our queer friends, our gay friends, like the whole LGBTQIA community is fighting for their lives. People of color in this country have been fighting for their lives forever. Like, look at what is happening in Springfield. We have just an absolute, this is racist trope going on here. It is a dog whistle. This whole people are eating like, that is so offensive, and it's putting Haitian immigrants in danger in a community where they've done a lot to help. I mean, really, if you're somebody who's confused about what's going on there, just go. Like, it's all this stuff is easily accessible. You can debunk this stuff very easily. It's not hard. If you want to, right? If you want to know what's true and what's not true, the information is readily available. So when you're putting people's lives at risk with your BS, it's not a joke. It's not funny. People are dying. It's not amusing. And if you're laughing, it's because your life is not directly impacted. But I am really curious, and I did say to this guy that was, on my page, do you have a mother? Do you have sisters? Do you have, I don't know, partners? Like, do you have women in your life that you care about? Because right now, like, based on the things that you're saying and the way that you're coming at me, I feel really sorry for them. This is not okay. And then I had another experience with someone that I consider a friend, who, told me, in the midst of this news cycle that I'm describing to you, that women would feel more empowered if they found ways to be grateful for the patriarchy. And he said it to me like he had really done something, something like really cool. He'd really like flipped that script, and was very impressed with himself, for coming up with that. And I was appalled. I was like shocked, I was like, wow, like, wow. Not where I'm coming from right now. And this is, this is a man like growing up in this culture, benefiting from this system, telling me I'd feel better if I could just find ways to be grateful for the patriarchy, because it gives women something to push back against. It helps women become their best selves and have a good, positive attitude about the kind of change they want to affect. Okay, sit down and be quiet is what I really want to say. Stop talking and just open your ears and close your mouth, because you have no clue what you're talking about right now. And it shows. And so, but I tried to be, first of all, this is, again, someone I consider a friend. And so I was stunned. And I know that you don't get through to people if you start yelling. And I'm not a yeller. And so I said, I was like, yeah, like, I find that, like, really deeply problematic, because of the messaging that we are hearing in this culture, women and girls, from the time we're tiny, about who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to feel, and how we're supposed to be helpful and nurturing and loving and never angry. It's like, and then you keep growing and you're getting messaging about how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to feel and how you're supposed to behave. And the teacher's like seating this boy next to me who has a hard time focusing because I'm a good student, so I'm supposed to now help him. That's my job now. Or, like, it goes on and on and on and on in a way that I can't, no matter how many horrific experiences I share with you, I'll never be able to fully express to you what it's like to grow up swimming in these waters, what it's like to know that at any time you could be overpowered, that you can't walk on the street late at night by yourself because you're not safe to do that. You can't leave your drink unattended because someone might drug it, Andrew Luster, or the Sky Gallo in Bucks County. Like it's a common thing that girls and women know. You don't leave your drink unattended. It's a way of being. It's a way of life. I was at a doctor's office with my son just a few days ago, and there's a female technician, and she's being followed around in the front office by these two, happen to be white, tall men, I would say in their 60s, saying things to her like, wow, like, how long have you been working here? And she's like 18 years. And they're like, wow, did you like start when you're 12? You look so young. You look great. And she's got that smile on her face that every woman knows. And it's a smile when you are like, please stop harassing me in the place where I work because there's nothing I can do. I can't tell you to, F off and keep effing off. I can't do that because I'll probably get fired and I need the job to feed my family. And there's not, I'm captive here. I work here. I'm stuck here. I saw her face, and they were like relentless. They're following her around and talking about her. And it's like, no one wants to hear that. No one wants to deal with your crap, honestly. Nobody wants to be in that situation. But as a woman, you got to take it, or you're going to get fired. Or, if you try to talk to somebody, a man, about like, something offensive, you have to be careful depending on where you are, the environment you're in, because your physical safety might be in jeopardy, or any number of things could happen that make you unsafe. So with this person that I thought was a friend, that I considered a friend, it's hard to consider someone a friend, even if you've known them a really long time, if they don't care about how you feel. And that's what happened. When I started to say, look, this is just a deeply problematic take that you have on this. Like, first of all, just the most basic level in the world, don't, as a man who has benefited from this system your whole life, don't tell a woman how to feel about the patriarchy. Don't tell a woman how to feel. Don't tell anyone how to feel. That's just step one. Step two, there's this toxic positivity thing where you're supposed to jam everything into your gratitude file. And that was the underlying message that he was going with here, is like, if you can find gratitude for this, then you're not a victim of it anymore, and that will feel better to you. It's like, don't tell me how to feel, okay? Because you get to walk safely on the streets at night, and you don't have to worry about your drink, and you don't have to worry about running in a desolate area, and you don't have to worry about a million things I have to worry about all the time, and not just for myself, now for my 15-year-old daughter. Why don't you be quiet? But I tried. I stayed calm, but I said, this is like really, I just have to tell you, like, growing up in this environment, it is very difficult. You're saying that this system helps you become your best self. I said, I'm 53 years old. I'm just now finding my voice to say this isn't okay. After 53 years of dealing with this crap, I'm not grateful for that. I was like, I said, like, aside from all the messaging you get about what your role is supposed to be and how you're supposed to feel and who you're supposed to be as a girl or as a woman and what your value is and, the ways that you are judged, aside from all that, I was like, it's across the board in every area. I was like, why am I paid 69 cents on the dollar if you and I are doing the same job and I'm doing it just as well or better than you? Why am I getting paid 69 cents and you're getting $1, but I'm paying the same taxes? And I'm going to tell you what happened. As I was trying to push back and say, well, time out on that. He was instantly deflated because I was not responding to his genius concept. And the way that he anticipated, I was not impressed. I was shocked and appalled. And then when I started to explain why, I watched him lose all interest in being in a conversation with me. I could see, and I could just, I could see him regretting that he'd even brought it up. And at a certain point, he sighed audibly and looked at the clock. So I stopped, because if someone is that, uninterested in my feelings or what I have to say, there's no point. And how is that a friend? That's not a friend. Not in my book. I require more than that from my friends. I definitely, if I said something deeply upsetting to him and he had said, wow, that is like, I got to tell you, that is really upsetting to me, I would have stopped everything and been like, oh, tell me about that. Like, what am I not understanding? That was not the reaction. The reaction was, how fast can I make this stop? I don't want to listen to this. It's so annoying when women don't just listen. Oh, great, she's angry. Oh, I guess she's like one of these angry feminist people. Like, it was just so, and the arrogance too, because he was very sure that he was correct. And it's just like, dude, you're not correct. Not spiritually, not intellectually, not in any way. This is not a good take, and I could have tried to help you understand from a woman's perspective what this is like, but you're not open to the information. I don't have time for that. And I was writing like not all men in this essay, because you got to always say that, right? Oh, but not all men, and I said some woman should write a song titled Not All Men. And please do take that. If you're listening and you are a songwriter, singer-songwriter, please write a song called Not All Men and enjoy that giant hit you're about to have. Because it isn't all men, obviously. And it's like crazy that needs to be said, but it feels like it needs to be said, because when you say these things, you always get some dude in the comments, not all men. Like, we know. If it was all men, none of us would be able to leave the house. It's not all men. It's way too many. It's way too many, and everywhere. Not just, in New York City, not just in the United States, everywhere. Uganda, France, Afghanistan, everywhere. Wherever there are men, there's male violence. And that's a problem that we need to be talking about. We need to get to the root of that. And my main message that I would like to say is this system's making everyone sick, not just girls and women, men as well, and boys growing up in this system. It's no good. This is not it. We need a real reboot here. And that's kind of ultimately where I'm at, and I wrote this essay, and it was very impassioned. Like, it's very hard. I don't even know what I can say to you about these women that are in the news right now and the way that they have been harmed. Again, like in Uganda, in France, here in the United States, women who are like bleeding out in parking lots because we have these insane, but if you think that it can't happen here, you've got the blinders on. I mean, I don't know what I can say to you, but like, if we're already fighting for equal access to life-saving healthcare, wake up, please, before it's too late. I mean, please, like, it's not a game. You put people like the man running again to be president, you put this kind of ticket in power, and you think it's not gonna be okay. It's not. I don't think you understand. If you are supporting that, I don't think you understand what's gonna happen here. It's not gonna be okay. Not for girls and women. It's not. It's clear. They're broadcasting it for us. They're not hiding it. It's right out there, and it's already happening. It's already happening. Like when Roe got overturned, that was This is just a preview of coming attractions. So of course I'm angry. I've been practicing yoga for over 30 years and I'm angry. Yeah, enraged, outraged, beside myself. This is not okay. And, we need to be fighting back hard, loudly and passionately. And again, I said this, like, I understand you may not be getting everything you want. We have two choices right now here in the United States about this upcoming presidential election. That's it. So again, we could talk about like how the two-party system isn't serving us, because I agree with you. But we don't have time for that. It's happening in November. And I know you might not be hearing everything you want to hear, from the Harris Walls ticket. Okay. But I mean, really, like, don't doom us to this kind of, hellscape that would be absolute. It's already happening. It's already in effect. Like, that's not going to help anyone anywhere in the world. It's not going to help anyone anywhere. And I can't be quiet. I can't be quiet because I can see what's happening. And I know a lot of people, I don't know, it's very hard sometimes when you've like dug your heels in on something and you refuse to budge. But I see people that are saying things that just they're not true, like, even for example, part of what happened in Missouri and is happening in Florida too, like people that are trying to get these measures on the ballot so they can then vote and say, no, I'm not okay with this restrictive abortion ban. They're being intimidated by police officers, and there's a woman, Jess Piper, who does great work on this. I highly recommend that you go seek her out. She's easy to find. She writes a lot. She's on Instagram. She's in real time telling you what's happening in Missouri. She worked really hard to get the ballot, to get the measure on the ballot so people could vote for it. And there were people in this particular thread that I was looking at under something that she had posted. And there was this woman who kept writing throughout the thread. People were saying, where is the Department of Justice? Like, this is election interference, like people are trying to get a measure on the ballot so they can vote on it, and they're being intimidated in their homes. And there was a woman saying, why do you think the DOJ should be involved? That's a state issue. It's not a federal issue. And like, my brain's exploding. Because the DOJ, the Department of Justice, they have a whole branch that is devoted to election interference and voter intimidation. And it is absolutely their job to investigate and shut that down. We're all supposed to be able to vote. We're all supposed to be able to use the tools that are available to us, the ones that are available to us in the Constitution, to engage with democracy and have our voices heard. That's how it's supposed to work, but that's not how it's working. And so, yeah, the Department of Justice gets involved. If they hear of a state and state agencies intimidating voters, yeah, it's their job to get involved. And not only do they have a whole branch devoted to election interference, voter suppression, voter intimidation, they also have a civil rights branch of that if it is found that the intimidation is being based on gender, race, nationality. So there's a giant part of the Department of Justice devoted to making sure your right to vote is protected. But I mean, it's tough. It's tough out there because you do have these things. When you start talking about leaving it to the states, there are some people in the states like, this is not pretty. And you need to understand how democracy works. If you're going to be voting, it would be really great if you understood, like, these are just like basic civics lessons that somehow or another are not being taught. And we're seeing what happens when you turn abortion back to the states. Women and children, girls and women, their lives are put at risk. I can't even say his name. He's running for president again. He wants to come back and he wants to dismantle the Department of Education and put that back to the states. What do you think is going to happen? There are people in these states, legislators, who don't believe in teaching critical race theory. They don't want your kid to know about the civil rights movement or slavery, which preceded it and is like totally, in the fabric of our history for 450, these are important things for our kids to understand so that we don't repeat the mistakes. They don't want to teach the Holocaust. There are Holocaust deniers out there. It's like, this is not, the people that are like supporting this ticket, I don't think, I have to think they're not paying attention to what this is actually going to look like. It is not going to be pretty. So, yeah, I'm impassioned. And yeah, I cursed a lot in the essay this week, and I wrote about things that are hard to read. And I'd much rather be writing about, non-harming, or like the quality of your inner dialogue, or, something that happened in a relationship that taught me something, about what to look for next time, or red flags. Believe me, I'd much rather be talking about other things and writing about other things. But I am a 53-year-old woman in this culture, and I'm not going to be quiet now. I can't. There's just like too much on the line for other girls and women in this country and in the world. And y'all, we need to like wake up quickly. We need to wake up quickly, and if you have I don't know how anyone frankly could watch that debate the other night and still be confused. I really don't. I just don't. But, I'm easy to find if you want to talk about any of this, and I always do my very best to engage respectfully. I really do. Even if it's a friend who just said something wildly offensive to me, I still try to engage in a calm and respectful manner. And I would really, if there is any confusion on anyone's part about any of this, and you want to engage in a respectful conversation, I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, I'm just really, really hoping that we can come together on some things that feel just so not just important, but like terrifying, and do everything we can to push back against an ideology that says we're less than, because we're not. I'm sorry, we are not. Women are amazing, okay? Like, we're amazing. The things that we deal with and the ways that we get up and face the day and deal with all the crap coming at us all the time and still manage to rise up and get things done. We definitely deserve, at the very least, an equal amount of respect. And I'm going to say at the very least. So I hope this was helpful. And I know sometimes people have a difficult time when women are angry, and I understand that, but I am angry. And if you don't get angry about these things that we're hearing in the news cycle all the time about male violence against women, I don't know what you're going to get angry about. It is time to be angry, and it's time to fight back loudly and in all the ways that you can. So anyway, I'm wishing you all the love, health, joy, in the world, and also, just hoping for a lot better for all of us. I really am. And I'll see you soon.